Lisa strangled Bobby Joe, then took steps to remove her.
Between her fingers, put the baby inside her coat and went out the door and got in her vehicle and drove off.
She also admitted poisoning 3 other people, including her mother.
I stopped on the way home and cleaned out my checking account to give my mom the money.
12 years has brought a lot of people together.
Life on death row is not life.
I'm prepared. I'm all right with it.
Number 16. Margie Velma Barfield. Margie Velma Barfield, also known as Velma Barfield, was an American serial slayer. She was born on October 29, 1932 in South Carolina, United States, and gained notoriety for her crimes in the 1970s. Barfield's criminal activities began in the late 1960s when she started stealing prescription drugs. Her addiction to amphetamines and other substances fueled her criminal behavior. However, it was her later crimes that garnered widespread attention. Between 1974 and 1978, Barfield poisoned several people, including family members and acquaintances. She primarily used arsenic to carry out her slays. The first victim was her very own mother, Dolly Edwards, whom Barfield poisoned with arsenic-laced tea. Subsequently, Barfield targeted her 2 husbands, Stuart Taylor and Jennings Barfield, and her fiancé, Reverend Dwight Moore. Barfield's motive for the slayings varied. She poisoned her victims to collect life insurance money or as a means to cover up thefts. Some accounts suggest that she felt a sense of control and power over her victims' lives, deriving pleasure from their suffering. In 1978, Barfield was arrested after an investigation into the demise of Dolly Edwards revealed the presence of arsenic in her system. During her trial, she initially denied the charges, but later confessed to the slayings. Barfield claimed remorse for her actions and stated that her drug addiction had influenced her behavior. Barfield was found guilty of 1 slaying and sentenced to demise in 1979. She was the first woman to be put down in the United States since the reinstatement of the ending penalty in 1976. On November 2, 1984, at the age of 52, Margie Velma Barfield was put down by lethal injection in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Of not knowing where you are or what you've done, I wish that I could take every bit of hurt on myself.
She also admitted poisoning 3 other people, including her mother.
For the hurt that I've caused so many people. Years of a drug nightmare. Body that I had been with for almost 6 years.
Number 15. Carla Faye Tucker. Carla Faye Tucker was a woman from the United States who rose to fame for her alleged participation in a horrible double slaying that took place in Texas in 1983. Her birthday is November 18, 1959, and she was born in Houston, Texas. On June 13, 1983, Tucker and her boyfriend at the time, Daniel Garrett, broke into the home of Jerry Lynn Dean and his girlfriend, Deborah Thornton. They stole several items from the property, they struck both victims violently with a pickaxe, and ultimately ended both of their lives. The public and the media were taken aback by the vicious nature of the crime. Both Tucker and Garrett were arrested shortly after the slayings and charged with first-degree slaying in connection with the slayings. Both Garrett and Tucker were sentenced to die, but Garrett was put down and Tucker was put down by lethal injection. Because it was so uncommon for women in the United States to be given the ending penalty, her case received a lot of attention owing to the fact that she was, indeed, a woman. Tucker experienced a conversion to Christianity and became a devoted follower of the faith when she was incarcerated in the ending row. She felt tremendous guilt about what she had done and begged forgiveness from everyone. Her story garnered the attention of a large number of activists, religious leaders, and celebrities, all of whom pleaded for clemency on her behalf and called for her sentence to be commuted. Carla Faye Tucker's appeals were denied, and the date of her execution was scheduled for February 3, 1998. This occurred in spite of the pleadings for mercy that were made on her behalf. She gave a number of interviews before being put to demise, during which she discussed the change that had taken place in her life and the regret that she felt for the slays she had committed. She communicated a desire to provide healing to the families of the victims. Carla Faye Tucker expressed her regret and her desire to be forgiven in her final statements, which she delivered on the day she was put to demise. On February 3, 1998, Carla Faye Tucker was put to demise at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas, by means of the injection of a drug that causes instant demise. Her case aroused questions about the role of religion in the criminal justice system, as well as the ending penalty and the possibility of redemption.
I don't think so, and hopefully that will change.
Should there be?
There should be, yes, because probably wishing there was a way I could give every...
Austin defense attorney, whose small office is just a few blocks from the state capitol.
I love you, Dana. Way, but I have to surrender that to the Lord.
Number 14. Judy Buenoano. Judy Buenoano, born Judias Welty, was an American woman who was convicted of slaying and other crimes in the 1980s. She was linked to the slayings of her own family members and romantic partners, and employed various methods such as poisoning, explosives, and drowning to carry out her crimes. In 1984, she was found guilty of first-degree slaying and the demise of her son, Michael, and sentenced to demise. On March 30th, 1998, she was put down by an electric chair at Florida State Prison. Her final words were nothing. Her case garnered attention due to her crimes and the nature of her execution. Number 13. Christina Riggs. Christina Riggs was an American woman convicted of a highly publicized crime involving the slaying of her 2 young children. Born on January 23, 1971 in Arkansas, Riggs had a troubled background that played a significant role in the events that would unfold. Riggs grew up in a dysfunctional family environment marked by substance abuse, domestic violence, and instability. She endured physical abuse at a young age and struggled with mental health issues throughout her life. Riggs was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder, receiving treatment and medication for her condition. On November 4, 1997, Riggs committed a tragic act that would forever change her life and the lives of her own children. Overwhelmed by her circumstances, Riggs smothered her 5-year-old son, Justin, with a plastic bag. She then turned her attention to her 2-year-old daughter, Shelby, and also suffocated her. After the slays, Riggs made an unsuccessful suicide attempt by ingesting various medications. She left a note expressing her intentions and outlining her struggles, including financial difficulties and her fear of losing custody of her children due to her mental health issues. Riggs was discovered and rushed to the hospital, where she was treated for the overdose. Upon recovery, she was arrested and charged with capital slaying. During the trial, Riggs's defense team argued that she was suffering from severe depression and psychosis at the time of the slayings. They contended that her mental state impaired her judgment and contributed to her actions. However, the prosecution maintained that Riggs was fully aware of her actions and sought the ending penalty. In 1998, Christina Riggs was found guilty of capital slaying and sentenced to demise. Her case garnered significant media attention, raising discussions about mental health, maternal filicide, and the application of the ending penalty. On May 2nd, the year 2000, Riggs was put down by lethal injection at the Cummins Unit, a maximum security prison in Arkansas. Her last words before execution were as follows: "Yes, I would like to say that I am sorry to everyone that I have hurt, especially my family, who has been there for me all along, my mother, my father, Francis, and my sisters, and the kids and everybody, and I love them very much. I love you, Francis." Riggs's final statement expressed remorse for her actions and conveyed love for her family, particularly her sister Frances, who had been a strong supporter throughout her legal proceedings. The case of Christina Riggs is a tragic illustration of the complex interplay between mental illness, personal circumstances, and the ultimate responsibility for one's own actions. Her crime and subsequent execution highlight the challenging decisions faced by the legal system when dealing with individuals struggling with mental health issues and the profound impact such cases have on the families involved.
I stopped on the way home and cleaned out my checking account to give my mom the money. Amitriptyline, and he just kind of, whined, "Mama." I wasn't expecting it to burn him. What it's like.
I'm sure
Oh, gosh. I used to pillow and suffocated Mama. After I laid down, he did.
Number 12. Wanda Jean Allen. Wanda Jean Allen was an African-American woman who gained national attention for being the first black woman to be put down in the United States since the reinstatement of the ending penalty in 1976. She was born on August 17, 1959 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Allen's life was marked by a tumultuous upbringing and struggles with her mental health. On December 11, 1981, she fatally shot her longtime girlfriend, Gloria Leathers, during a heated argument in a parking lot in Oklahoma City. The crime took place in the midst of an emotionally charged relationship that was fraught with violence. Allen was arrested, charged with first-degree slaying, and convicted in 1982. She received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. However, her case was far from over. In the years following her conviction, Allen's legal team fought for her release and argued that she suffered from intellectual disabilities and severe mental health issues, which should have been considered during her trial. They claimed that her limited intellectual capacity and impaired decision-making skills affected her ability to fully understand the consequences of her actions. Despite these arguments, Allen's appeals were unsuccessful, and her execution date was set for January 11, 2001. Her case garnered significant attention from activists, human rights organizations, and advocates against the ending penalty, who believed her execution would be a violation of her constitutional rights. On the day of her execution, Wanda Jean Allen's final words were addressed to the family of her victim. She said, "I want to apologize to the Leathers family. I wish I could take it back, but I can't." Her words reflected remorse and a desire for reconciliation. Allen was put down by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. Her case raised important questions about the intersection of mental health, intellectual disabilities, and the application of the ending penalty. The execution of Wanda Jean Allen sparked debates about the fairness and justice of capital punishment, particularly when applied to individuals with intellectual disabilities and mental health issues. Her case also highlighted the racial and gender disparities within the criminal justice system and ignited discussions surrounding the appropriate punishment for individuals who commit acts of violence due to impaired decision-making capabilities. Today, the case of Wanda Jean Allen serves as a reminder of the complex issues surrounding the ending penalty and the importance of considering an individual's mental health and cognitive abilities when determining the appropriate punishment.
Do you believe that God can save you?
Yes, daughters should have been here with them today for the holidays. Both our families are missing us.
Dear Lord, give Wanda Jean Allen the words to say, the words that you want her to.
To forgive others in order to be forgiven, and for him to guide and direct my life.
Your sentence first, and then I'll give plenty of time for you.
And had pistol whipped her before shooting her in the head. Still, Wanda Jean Allen pled guilty. One police expert concluded that Pettis's bruises and powder burns proved that Allen...
12 years has brought a lot of people together.
People talk about finding faith in prison. I can do it.
Number 11. Betty Lou Beets. Betty Lou Beets was an American woman who gained notoriety for her involvement in the slaying of her fifth husband and the suspicious disappearance of her fourth husband. She had a history of domestic violence, and evidence suggested she had staged Jimmy Don's disappearance to collect life insurance benefits. In 1990, she was arrested and charged with multiple counts of slaying, and during her trial, she maintained her innocence and claimed that she had acted in self-defense. She had no last words. On February 24, 2000, she was put down by lethal injection at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. Number 10. Linda Lyon Block. Because of her role in a high-profile crime that took place in Alabama, the United States citizen Linda Lyon Block was found guilty of slaying and ultimately put to demise for her actions. Her birthday is February 8, 1948, and she was born in Birmingham, Alabama. Block and her lover, George Sibley Jr., were responsible for the demise of two people on November 16, 1993. They took a woman by the name of Opelika Morrison and her son Nathan, who was 13 years old, from the house where they were living. A disagreement involving drugs and money served as the impetus for the criminal act. Block and Sibley slayed their victims by taking them to an isolated location and then shooting them to demise there. Both Block and Sibley have been taken into custody and charged with first-degree slaying. In separate trials, both defendants were found guilty, and Block was ultimately sentenced to demise for his crimes. On the other side, Sibley was given a sentence of life in jail without the possibility of release. The fact that Block was a woman and the seriousness of the offense that she committed both garnered great attention from the media. She was the first woman in the United States to be put to demise by electrocution since 1954, and the first woman to be put to demise in the state of Alabama since 1957. At the Holman Correctional Facility in Amore, Alabama, on May 10, 2002, Linda Lyon Block was given the ending penalty and put to demise by electrocution. She did not accept her previous statements.
As she's done nearly every day since 1994, she reads her morning paper.
Life on death row is not life.
Marksman.
When he realized that I was shooting at him, he turned toward me with his gun in.
4 hours later, Lyon and Sibley gave themselves up.
And that bothers me a lot. But I don't regret that I defended my husband. I want to walk away. That was the hardest thing I ever did.
Was only trying to prevent the police officer from killing her husband.
It helps me escape mentally from the confinement of prison.
Number 9. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos was an American woman who rose to popularity as a serial slayer during the late 1980s and early 1990s in the United States. Her birthday is February 29, 1956, and she was born in Rochester, Michigan. The public's attention has been drawn to the problematic life of the Wuornos, as well as his crimes, which in turn sparked conversations about the nexus of mental health, abuse, and criminal behavior. The criminal operations that Wuornos was involved in centered on prostitution, as well as the slaying of several different individuals. She slayed 7 men in the state of Florida between the years 1989 and 1990. Wuornos would frequently slay the people she pretended to be having physical encounters with after luring them to remote regions with the promise of a physical encounter. Her targets were almost often adult men in their middle years. Her criminal behavior was driven by a complex interplay of her personal experiences, which included a background of abuse, horrific events, and a profound mistrust of men. She stated that her victims had either physically assaulted her or attempted to physically assault her, which led her to believe that she was acting in self-defense when she committed the crimes. When Wuornos was captured in 1991, the slaying spree that she had been on came to a halt. She was accused of many counts of slaying and faced a trial that would be widely covered in the media. Throughout the hearings, Wuornos exhibited erratic behavior and made provocative statements, both of which contributed to the increased attention that the media and the public have paid to her case. In 1992, a jury convicted Wuornos guilty of 6 of the 7 slays, and she was ultimately given the demise sentence for her crimes. Others saw her as a cold-blooded serial slayer who deserved the heaviest punishment possible, while others argued that her troubled past and claims of self-defense should be considered mitigating elements in her case. Her situation sparked a significant amount of controversy, and some people argued that her troubled past and claims of self-defense should be considered mitigating considerations. Eileen Wuornos was put to demise at Florida State Prison on October 9, 2002 by means of the injection of a deadly drug. In her concluding remarks, she was quoted as saying, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. 6th of June, just like the movie, large mothership and everything else, I'll be seeing you again." In her most recent interview, she continued to refuse to reveal any information about herself or the location of the interview. Some others interpreted her final statements as being mysterious and delusional, which was a reflection of her worsening mental health. Some people thought they were references to popular culture, while others thought they were religious views or a coping mechanism for the upcoming execution. No matter what they meant, Wuornos' last comments were interpreted as a chilling finale to her tumultuous life.
I'm prepared. I'm all right with it. And they covered it up and let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. When I had 3 meetings with Miss Villacorta on it.
Right.
Running into trouble, I shoot the guy if I ran into trouble. We're gonna have to cut this interview, Nick. And that was covered up.
Number 8. Robin Lee Rowe. Robin Lee Rowe was convicted of a horrific crime involving arson and slaying on February 10, 1992 in Idaho. The investigation revealed evidence of accelerants and an intentionally blocked exit, suggesting that Rowe had deliberately set the fire to slay her family. She was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree slaying and was sentenced to demise.
Any parent is protective over their children, and had he been this abusive parent,
for a period of, I don't know, about 4 or 5 weeks. And a few times she came here.
We feel the one to be evidence, and then the one we feel probably doesn't have any kind of an accelerant on it, and she compared
of life insurance policies and the opportunity to move to a new state, and that she simply weighed those two. Any reasonable spouse would have wanted to remove the kids from that situation. Her story was, Robin, that they wanted to stay with Randy and not go with her. And of course, they were Robin's natural children and not Randy's. That Robin or the kids were the victims of any kind of violence, any bruises by anybody. Is that he was only abusive with her and not with the kids. That's not the norm, and certainly in law enforcement.
However, on March 27, 2020, her demise sentence was overturned by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, resulting in her sentence being commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Robin Lee Rowe remains a tragic example of domestic violence and the devastating consequences it can have on families. She gave no last words before her execution. Number 7. Frances Newton. Frances Newton was an African-American woman who was convicted of slaying her husband and 2 children. She was born on April 12, 1965 in Houston, Texas. On April 7, 1987, the bodies of Adrian Newton, her husband, Alton Newton, her 7-year-old son, and Farrah Newton, her 21-month-old daughter, were found in their home. They had all been shot to demise. Frances Newton reported the incident to the police, claiming that an unknown intruder had committed the slayings. However, during the investigation, inconsistencies emerged in Frances Newton's statements, and evidence against her began to accumulate.
The issue with the ballistics and the gun, they would have found out that the shell like fingerprints. It's something that wasn't brought up in trial, and I think Freeze told my father when he came to get me from my parents' house that there were 2 guns in the States. There are so many things that I don't know and I don't have answers to. Dad had talked to me about insurance. I don't know. I don't feel like, on my part, after so many times, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do this and let him see how it feels. But they said, okay, this happened. Don't make the mistake again, and I looked in the cabinet where he normally kept drugs, and there wasn't any in there, but there was this gun there. But they said, okay, this happened, don't make the mistake again, and they encouraged me to. I don't feel guilt in the sense that if I had done something, come out of his room and say, Mom, Dad, sleep under the bed, under his bed. We wouldn't see his car anywhere but But what I know is that the gun I had the day that I left my apartment is not the murder.
Financial difficulties and an extramarital affair provided possible motives for the crime. Furthermore, forensic analysis revealed that she had gunshot residue on her hands, suggesting that she had fired a weapon. Frances Newton was arrested, charged with capital slaying in 1988. During her trial, the prosecution argued that she had slayed her family to collect insurance money. The defense, however, maintained her innocence and pointed to the lack of direct evidence linking her to the crime scene. In 1988, Frances Newton was convicted of the slayings and sentenced to demise. She spent nearly 2 decades in Ending Row, maintaining her innocence and appealing her conviction multiple times. Her case garnered attention from activists and advocates who questioned the fairness of her trial and the possibility of a wrongful conviction. On September 14, 2005, Frances Newton was put down by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. In her last interview, she described everything and said that proper evidence was not brought into the court. She didn't say any last words before her execution. These final words expressed her continued assertion of innocence and her belief in her wrongful conviction. They highlighted her perception that the justice system had failed her. The case of Frances Newton has remained controversial throughout these years, with ongoing debates about her guilt or innocence. Some argue that there were significant flaws in the investigation and trial, raising doubts about her culpability. Others believe that the evidence presented was compelling enough to support her conviction. Number 6. Teresa Lewis. Teresa Lewis, together with 2 other men, Matthew Schallenberger and Rodney Fuller, plotted the slaying of her husband, Julian Lewis, and her stepson, Charles Lewis, on October 30, 2002. Gaining financial advantage was the driving force behind Teresa's decision to commit the crime, as she did stand to profit from life insurance policies. The slayings were carried out by Schallenberger and Fuller, who shot both victims while they were inside their home. After the event, Teresa Lewis admitted that she was involved in the contract slaying that had been planned. She was taken into custody in 2003, accused of first-degree slaying, and ultimately found guilty of the crime. Because of her gender, her limited intellectual ability, and the controversial nature of the ending penalty, her case received a large amount of attention from the media. During Teresa Lewis's trial, the defense maintained that she was a victim of Schallenberger and Fuller's manipulation. They focused on her low IQ and her dependent mentality to make her case. She was still found guilty in 2003 and given a demise sentence despite the fact that these arguments were presented. The execution of people who suffer from intellectual disabilities has been the subject of heated discussion on both a national and international scale ever since the case of Teresa Lewis.
Received the death penalty after hiring 2 men to kill her husband and stepson in 2002, killing of family members. Now, as you mentioned, Teresa is out of options tonight.
Teresa Lewis was put to death by lethal injection for hiring someone to kill her husband and her stepson.
Of shoplifting. A canine also brought in to assist in the search for a possible weapon.
To kill her husband and stepson. The murders happened in 2002.
Under investigation that prompted our 2 Fairfax County police officers to charge their firearms.
Police say they don't know if the suspect had a weapon.
Scheduled to die by injection on Thursday, Lewis pleaded guilty in 2003. In a request for clemency,
he only has an IQ of 72, just 2 points above the legal minimum for execution in Virginia.
Advocates stated that during the phase of sentencing, her intellectual disabilities should have been considered as a mitigating factor because they should have been taken into account. At the Greensville Correctional Center in Girard, Virginia on September 23, 2010, Teresa Lewis was put to demise through the administration of a fatal injection. Her final statement before being put to demise was, "I just want Kathy to know that I love her, and I'm very sorry." Her daughter, Kathy Clifton, served as a witness during the process of her mother's execution. The last words spoken by Teresa Lewis were an expression of her love for her daughter, as well as regret for the actions that she had taken. Concerns over fair treatment and the possibility of being manipulated or coerced were brought to light as a result of the case of Teresa Lewis, which highlighted questions about whether or not it is proper to impose the ending penalty on those with intellectual disabilities. Her execution brought attention to broader issues concerning the demise sentence, mental health, and the ability for individuals to be rehabilitated within the criminal justice system. Number 5. Kimberly McCarthy. Kimberly McCarthy was an American woman who was convicted of slaying and put down for her crimes. She was born in 1961 in Texas and slayed her 71-year-old neighbor Dorothy Booth during a robbery. She was linked to 2 other slayings and spent over a decade on Ending Row.
Texas carried out its 500th execution tonight since the death penalty resumed here in 1980.
Dallas County District Attorney supporting a stay of execution for a notorious convicted killer.
Fox 4's
DA Craig Watkins will come at a 9:30 news conference this morning here at the Crowley Courts building. Her execution until the fate of those 6 separate bills now at the state capitol was determined. Watkins has agreed to a temporary stay in the scheduled execution of Kimberly McCarthy, requesting the delay because of proposed legislation in Austin aimed at improving. Dallas County did receive a fair trial. Reporting live at the Crowley Courts building, Dan Godwin on Good Day.
On June 26, 2013, she was put down by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. Her last words before her execution expressed acceptance of her impending execution and a message of peace, referring to her belief that she would find peace and justice on the other side. According to her, quote, "It was not a loss and she was going to meet Jesus." Number 4. Kelly Gissendaner. Kelly Renee Gissendaner was a citizen of the United States who was given the ending penalty by the state of Georgia in the United States of America for her role in the slaying of her husband, Douglas Gissendaner. Gissendaner was 28 years old at the time of the slaying, while her husband was 30. After Owen agreed to testify against her as part of a plea deal, she was found guilty of plotting the slaying of her husband and ultimately received a demise sentence in the year 1998.
Rare for someone to be put to death who did not actually pull the trigger in a murder. Today, a lot of people are going to be questioning whether this was fair, especially.
We didn't think that he was on a main road, so we went down back roads, we went through woods, we went through dirt roads.
We'll have uniformed officers as well as detectives. We'll go to the area where the vehicle was located and probably do a grid.
Or at least pick up the phone and call.
Even the Vatican weighed in with a letter from an emissary of the Pope. Quote,
"Me since learning that Doug Gissendaner has been missing. They've been posting flyers in cars and every place they can possibly put one up.
It was uncovered that Gissendaner had threatened witnesses and planned to pay a witness to lie under oath. She experienced a conversion to Christianity when she was incarcerated, and she used this time to minister to the other women who were housed in the same facility as her. Gissendaner spent her time behind bars with a group of other women who, once she was released, went on to find the Struggle Sisters. Gissendaner joined a theology studies program designed specifically for incarcerated individuals and struck up a friendship with Jürgen Moltmann during his time there. Her execution was postponed because of a winter storm, and it was suspected that one of the medications used in the procedure was no longer effective. On September 30th, Gissendaner was put to demise at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia, by means of an injection of a drug that causes the ending penalty. She let out sobs, said some prayers, and sang Amazing Grace to convey her anguish and her hopes for her loved ones. After the year 1945, she was the first woman ever to be put to demise in the state of Georgia. Number 3. Lisa Ann Coleman. Coleman and her lover Marcella Williams were held responsible for the slaying of Williams' son Devontae, who was 9 years old at the time of the crime and was found dead in 2004. Over a protracted period of time, the parents in question subjected the child to extreme maltreatment, which included beatings as well as hunger. The maltreatment caused Devontae to become malnourished and dehydrated, which ultimately led to his demise. Coleman and Williams were both placed under arrest, charged with first-degree slaying, and put on trial individually.
A Texas woman has been executed for the 2004 torture and starvation death of her girlfriend's 9-year-old.
38-year-old Lisa Ann Coleman is about to become the 9th person executed in Texas this year, but the Arlington woman is...
She has had an opportunity to make some phone calls if she wants to some other people, and so...
Marcella Williams was also convicted in that crime. She pled guilty to capital murder in exchange for a life. One of these happens. Mine was back in June of 1985. Just the 8th person in Texas put to execute a person in, strap them on, get the lethal and more than 250 wounds. Prison spokesman Robert Hurst spent some time with Lisa Coleman today. He says she's at the time a young man from Fort Worth who robbed a liquor store and shot execution style an elderly couple.
During the course of the trial, evidence was given that revealed the awful conditions that Devontae was forced to suffer, as well as the part that both women had in abusing him. The prosecution alleged that Coleman was involved in mistreating the boy and did nothing to protect him, despite knowing what was happening. In 2006, Lisa Ann Coleman was found guilty of first-degree slaying and given the ending penalty for her crime. Her story received a large amount of attention from the media and sparked conversations about the abuse and neglect of children, as well as the responsibility of care to protect children who are especially vulnerable. At the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas on September 17, 2014, Lisa Ann Coleman was put to demise through the administration of a fatal injection. Her final statement before being put to demise was, "Tell my family that I love them. Please convey my love to my family. Tell Marcella I adore her. It's catching fire." Her last remarks were filled with love for her family and Marcella Williams, the other defendant in the case, as well as her former boyfriend. The phrase, "it's burning," could be taken as a figurative representation of her impending demise as a result of the process of administering the lethal injection. The execution of Lisa Ann Coleman brought to light the complications that surround incidents of child abuse, as well as the responsibility that falls on cares to safeguard children who are especially vulnerable. Her situation sparked conversations about the importance of early intervention, increased awareness, and support structures to avert the disastrous outcomes that she experienced. Number 2. Suzanne Basso. Suzanne Basso was convicted for her involvement in a heinous slaying that took place in 1998. She was born in 1954 in New York and orchestrated the brutal slaying of Louis Buddy Musso, a mentally impaired man, in order to collect insurance money. Basso and her co-conspirators subjected Musso to extreme physical abuse, including beatings, burnings, and stabbing him with objects. After the slaying, Basso and her accomplices staged the scene to make it look like an accident, but their plan unraveled during the investigation. Basso's trial brought to light her manipulation of vulnerable individuals and her ruthless pursuit of financial gain. On February 5, 2014, Basso was put down by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas, marking the final legal chapter of her case and bringing closure to the victims' families. She had no last words before her execution. Number 1. Lisa Montgomery. Lisa Montgomery was convicted for the brutal slaying of Bobby Jo Stinnett, a pregnant woman, in December of 2004.
Lisa strangled Bobby Jo, then took steps to remove her.
Between her fingers, put the baby inside her coat and went out the door and got in her vehicle and drove off.
Montgomery's crime involved a premeditated attack on Stinnett, which was driven by Montgomery's desire to abduct Stinnett's unborn child. Montgomery, who had falsely claimed to be pregnant, made contact with Stinnett under the guise of wanting to purchase a dog. Once inside Stinnett's home in Skidmore, Missouri, Montgomery attacked her, strangled her with a rope, and used a kitchen knife to remove the baby from her womb. Montgomery then left the scene with the newborn, claiming it as her own. The authorities apprehended Montgomery a day later and recovered the baby, who was unharmed. Montgomery's actions shocked the community and drew significant media attention due to the horrifying nature of the crime. In 2007, Lisa Montgomery was found guilty of federal kidnapping, resulting in demise, and she was sentenced to demise. Her case highlighted the intersection of mental illness and criminal behavior, as Montgomery had a history of mental health issues, including psychosis and post-traumatic stress disorder, stemming from a life marked by abuse and trauma. Due to the severity of Montgomery's mental illness, legal and psychological experts have contended over the years that her mental status should have been considered relevant during her trial, and that she had been given a more lenient sentence as a result of the trial's outcome. Concerns were raised by her legal team over whether or not she was competent to stand trial. She did not offer any parting comments. At the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana, on the 13th day of January 2021, Lisa Montgomery was put to demise through the use of a lethal injection. It had been almost 7 decades since the last time a woman had been put to demise by the federal government when she was put down. Montgomery's attorneys argued in the days leading up to her execution that their client's mental health had worsened to the point where her execution would constitute an act of cruelty. And that's all for today's video, folks. We'll see you next time at the next one.